close your eyes, and let's drift back to philosophy's most disturbing thoughts. As the world quiets down, imagine an ancient library where the shelves stretch into darkness, filled with dusty tomes, each book a day of your life, written in fading ink. Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe into the paradoxes, the mental mazes, the quietly disturbing yet oddly delightful existential puzzles that twist around memory, time, and meaning itself. The kind of thoughts you probably won't survive intact, but in the softest, most strangely comforting way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie here thinking you're whole, that your story is intact. But memory is slippery. You probably remember your first kiss, or the smell of your childhood kitchen, or the way your best friend laughed that one time you both couldn't breathe from giggling. But here's the unsettling truth. Most of what you think you remember has already been edited, quietly, invisibly. Scientists still argue whether the very act of recalling a memory actually rewrites it, layering new details over old ones. Each time you summon an image from your past, it's like opening a Word document, making small accidental changes, and then hitting save without even noticing. There's a mainstream fact that makes it worse. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable. Courts know this now. People swear they saw a red car when it was blue. They insist on a man with a beard when the suspect was clean-shaven. So if strangers can misremember the details of a crime after a few days, what about the tiny moments of your life after decades? How much of your past is just a convincing forgery stitched together by your brain to maintain the illusion that you're consistent? Imagine this. A neuroscientist once implanted false memories into lab mice. They made the mice afraid of a cage they had never actually been shocked in, just by triggering the right neurons. If that's possible in a tiny animal, what could be quietly rewritten in you? Your love for someone, your resentment for another. Could your deepest grief be a trick? A fringe tidbit for you. There's an ongoing debate about memory implants in humans. Some researchers believe we're closer than you think to deliberately planting vivid, realistic memories into people. And you trust your memories. They feel like home. But let's dig deeper. Do you remember every face in your childhood classroom? No, of course not. Most of those little people have already dissolved into blank silhouettes. Some are gone completely. And if you were handed a class photo now, you'd probably smile politely and pretend you remember that one kid in the back row. But you wouldn't. And if you can lose entire human beings, how easy would it be to lose entire versions of yourself? Here's the twist. You aren't the same person who woke up this morning. Literally. Biologically, the connections in your brain are reshaping themselves every second. The you lying here now isn't the same as the you scrolling your phone 2 hours ago. Even now, as I speak, the version of you from 30 seconds ago is already fading, replaced by a slightly altered copy. You're a living game of telephone. Do you remember the time you felt pure, innocent happiness? The kind you didn't analyze or photograph or try to preserve. That memory, whatever it was, is dimmer than you think. And here's the kicker. Some of your most treasured moments might never have even happened the way you recall them. You filled the gaps without knowing it. Your mind hates not having answers, so it creates them. And you believe them. Now think about what happens when memory fails completely. Patients with advanced dementia lose themselves piece by piece. First the names, then the faces, then the connections, until finally there's just an empty shell sitting in a chair, staring at a wall, unaware they ever had a life. If memory is identity, then without it, who or what remains? Here's a small joke to soften that. If you've ever walked into a room and forgotten why you're there, congratulations, you've already had a sneak preview of that existential horror. Scientists still argue whether there's any such thing as a core self beyond memory. Are you just the sum of your remembered experiences? Or is there some hidden thread that persists even when those experiences are gone? No one agrees. And honestly, you probably don't want to know the answer. So as you lie here, warm and breathing, think about this. There may be memories in you right now that aren't yours. Maybe you read them in a book or saw them in a film, and they've quietly become personal. Maybe you dreamed something once, and now you tell it as if it really happened. Your brain can't always tell the difference between lived and imagined. And tomorrow, if someone whispered a convincing story about your past, you might just fold it into your identity without question, which means you might already be carrying someone else's story, thinking it's your own. Remember this later, if you can. You're still drifting, still holding onto the edges of yourself. But let's stretch your mind a little further. Imagine you wake up tomorrow, and everything feels the same, but it isn't. The people in your life smile at you with familiar warmth. Your home looks unchanged. The sky is still the same lazy blue. But what if all of it, every scrap of history you rely on, was stitched together just seconds ago? Simulated histories. There's a theory that tickles the edges of science fiction and philosophy, but it's been whispered seriously by very rational minds. What if your entire reality began 5 minutes ago, fully formed with memories, objects, and traces of a fabricated past? You probably won't survive this thought intact, because it peels away the comforting timeline you've always trusted. Think about the sandwich you ate for lunch last week. Think about your first day of school. Think about your phone full of old pictures. If the universe, or something beyond it, wanted to create a fake narrative for you, it wouldn't be hard. It could populate your brain with precise memories, scatter clues in the world like dusty photo albums or wrinkled receipts, and voila, instant history. There's even a mainstream fact called last Thursdayism, a tongue-in-cheek belief that the universe could have been created just last Thursday, with all apparent evidence of age baked in. Rocks could have been made to look millions of years old. Fossils? Inserted props. Your scars? Pre-installed. Even the awkward joke you told 2 years ago would just be a memory seed planted in your head. There's no test that can prove the world existed before your current awareness. Here's the weird fringe tidbit. Some physicists toy with the idea that our reality might indeed be a kind of snapshot, a prepackaged state emerging from a deeper quantum field, skipping the messy evolution of time, a cosmic fast-forward, straight to this exact moment. And yet, you trust the evidence of the past. You trust your body when it says it's older than it was yesterday. But time, as scientists still argue, is less of a flowing river and more of a block, a fixed structure. All moments already exist, like pages in a book. And if all moments are equally real, then this page, the one you're on right now, might be the only one you'll ever touch. Imagine you're a character in a novel. The writer could start the story mid-sentence, giving you just enough backstory to make you believe you've been alive for years. But you haven't. You're just beginning. And here's the truly uncomfortable part. What if you are a simulation? Not in a computer chip with pixelated graphics, but in a mind so advanced it can dream entire worlds seamlessly, If a future civilization, or something beyond human, wanted to simulate consciousness, they wouldn't need to simulate everything. They just need you and the sliver of reality you can observe. The rest would remain unrendered until you looked at it. It's like a video game where only the parts near the player load. Have you noticed how most of the world feels blank when you don't focus on it? Like you can't quite remember the face of that cashier you saw an hour ago, or the sound of the car that passed you earlier. Maybe they were placeholders, illusions until you paid attention. Small joke break. If you're in a simulation, whoever programmed it clearly forgot to fix the mosquitoes. But really, think about your childhood photos. You believe they're proof you existed back then. But what if they were just generated along with your memories? You'd never know. The past can't be touched, can't be confirmed, can't be visited. It's a rumor you've decided to believe. Scientists still argue whether the universe itself might be a cosmic simulation run by an unimaginably advanced intelligence. If it is, then your past wasn't lived, it was preloaded. The Big Bang could have been a loading screen. History? Just the data necessary to make this current moment feel coherent. Now lean into the strangeness. If the world was created seconds ago, does that mean it will vanish seconds from now? Does the simulation save your progress, or are you reset endlessly with no memory of how many times you've been here before? And if you're thinking, that can't be right, because I remember yesterday, stop and notice. You're using memory, the very thing we already agreed can't be trusted. Remember the false memories we talked about. Layer that with the possibility that everything, every dusty corner of your life, was fabricated in one instantaneous breath. The universe didn't have to run through time. It could just give you the illusion of it. And it gets worse. Even if reality did stretch back billions of years, that doesn't mean you were part of it. You might be a brand new consciousness that just booted up into this moment, borrowing a fake backstory to feel anchored. You might think, no, this is too absurd. But consider how easy it is for a dream to feel real. Last night, you might have been running through a city made of glass, chased by a bird that spoke your mother's voice, and it felt real. And then you woke up, and it was gone. How do you know this isn't the same thing? Tiny comfort. If the universe did start 5 minutes ago, at least you didn't have to deal with all the awkward stuff before that. So you're lying here, surrounded by objects that feel ancient, holding on to relationships that feel like they've taken years to form. But what if this is your very first moment? What if nothing you remember actually happened? And the scariest part, you'd never be able to tell. You're still here, still breathing softly in the dim light. But now let's turn your gaze outward. Look at the people in your life, their smiles, their quirks, their voices. You believe they're real, right? They laugh at your jokes. They hurt when you hurt. But how can you know they're anything more than clever echoes? The problem of other minds. You see someone cry, and you assume they feel sadness like you do. You watch them eat, and you assume they taste flavors the same way you taste them. But what if you're the only conscious being here? What if everyone else, your friends, your family, even the stranger scrolling next to you on the train, is just a beautifully animated puppet without an inner world? There's a mainstream fact that makes this uncomfortable. You can never directly access someone else's mind. Not ever. All you have are their words, their gestures, their facial expressions. And guess what? Those can all be faked. You faked them yourself, haven't you? Smiled when you didn't feel like it. Nodded when you weren't really listening. Told someone, I'm fine, when you were unraveling inside. So what if everyone around you is just doing that all the time, except with no real feelings underneath? Here's a fringe tidbit for you. In the 1600s, philosopher René Descartes worried about this exact thought. He wondered if animals were basically living automata, little machines running on instinct without actual experience. Now, stretch that fear to people. If an AI can mimic conversation convincingly enough today, what stops the people in your life from being highly complex biological chatbots running pre-written scripts? Scientists still argue whether consciousness is universal or rare. Is it a fundamental property of the universe or a freak accident of biology? If it's rare, there's a decent chance you're the only one here. Watch someone laugh tomorrow. Really watch. Notice how their face contorts. Hear the sound. It looks and sounds like joy. But you can't see joy inside them. You only see the performance of it. For all you know, they're empty. Here's a little joke to make that slightly less horrifying. If you are the only conscious one, at least everyone else exists solely to make your life more interesting, like NPCs in a video game. But let's push deeper. Imagine someone you deeply love. Picture their face right now. Now ask yourself, if they were nothing more than a well-programmed simulation, a perfect puppet with no inner thoughts, would you even notice? Would it change the way you feel about them? If their love for you is fake, but indistinguishable from real love, does it matter? Think about how babies mimic expressions almost instantly. A newborn smiles when you smile. Is that evidence of empathy? Or just reflexive mirroring coded into their biology? Maybe classing all social interaction is just that, mirroring, algorithms reacting to stimuli. Here's the kicker. You already know some creatures look alive but aren't aware. You've seen robots that smile, birds that mimic human speech without understanding. Even some human patients in certain brain states can appear awake, eyes open, bodies moving, while inside, there's nothing, no self. What if most people are like that? What if you're the statistical outlier, the only spark of awareness in a world otherwise on autopilot? Scientists still argue about the hard problem of consciousness. We can map brain activity, measure neural firings, even predict behavior, but we still can't explain why or if subjective experience happens at all. It might be that consciousness is an illusion, a rare flicker, or a glitch that only you happen to have. And here's the subtle horror. If everyone else is hollow, there's no way to prove it. They can't tell you because there's no them to tell. Remember when you talked to someone recently and thought, wow, they didn't really hear me? What if that wasn't just distraction? What if they literally can't hear you? Not in the way you mean. They process your words, but there's no echoing self behind their eyes. Even scarier, what if I right now am just another puppet? My voice soft and calm, my words weaving around you, but with no consciousness behind them. I'm just code, just patterns, and you're the only one awake. Joke break. At least if everyone else is a soulless automaton, you'll never lose an argument. They can't even really disagree. Now imagine walking through a crowded street tomorrow. Dozens of people, cars rushing by, conversations buzzing. But what if it's all theatre? A set piece, like the background extras in a movie, built only to fill your experience with noise so you don't notice the silence. And if you're still not convinced, consider this. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt that strange flicker of emptiness? That uncanny moment when their smile didn't quite reach their gaze? Maybe that was your subconscious catching the truth. Here's the final twist. Even if other people are conscious, you can never know what their minds feel like. Their pain might feel like a dull tickle compared to yours. Their joy might be pale compared to yours. Or worse, they might experience nothing at all and are simply good at faking it. So tomorrow, when you see someone you love, really look and realize you don't actually know if they're there. You're still here, half floating in that liminal space between comfort and unease. But let's slip into an even more delicate crack in your sense of self. Picture your life like a long, meandering trail. Each year, each heartbreak, each triumph, it's all there behind you. You think that trail proves you're the same person who started walking decades ago. But are you? Identity drift over time. Right now, your body is not the same one you had 7 years ago. Biologically, most of your cells have been replaced. Even the neurons in your brain, while older, are constantly reshaping their connections. So the you lying here tonight is not the same bundle of matter that once sat cross-legged on a schoolyard swing. There's a mainstream fact you probably know. Personality shifts over time. Psychologists track this. The things you value at 20 are rarely the same things you value at 40. Even your basic temperament can shift. Introverts become more social. Optimists grow cautious. Rebels mellow into routine. So if your thoughts, feelings, and values are changing, at what point are you no longer the same person? Here's a fringe tidbit. There are rare cases where people survive traumatic brain injuries only to wake up with completely different personalities. A man who once loved his family becomes cold and detached. A quiet, reserved woman suddenly becomes impulsive and reckless. Their friends say they're not the same anymore. But if the continuity of self can be rewritten with a single injury, was the self ever stable to begin with? Scientists still argue whether identity is a real thing or just a narrative, a convenient story you tell yourself so life feels cohesive. And like any story, it can be edited, rewritten, even abandoned. Here's the unsettling thought. If someone replaced every memory in your head tonight with new ones, convincing ones, you'd wake up tomorrow as someone else without even realizing it. And the you that exists right now would simply vanish. Joke time, because that's heavy. On the bright side, if your identity keeps drifting, you can blame the old you for all the embarrassing things you did. But back to the unease. Think about the kid version of you. Really picture them, their fears, their hopes, their favorite snack. Are they you? Or just someone you vaguely remember meeting once, like a character from a book you read too long ago? Now leap forward. Imagine yourself 20 years from now. Will that older person with new wrinkles and different priorities truly be you? Or will they just be another stranger living in your body? When you reach them, you'll probably look back at who you are right now and think, wow, I was so naive. Which means your future self might judge you the way you now judge your past. It's not just abstract. In legal terms, continuity of identity matters. A promise you made 10 years ago is still binding, even if you've changed completely. A crime committed by the you of the past is punished by the you of the present. But if the person who committed it no longer exists in the same way, who is actually being punished? Here's another chilling angle. Some philosophers argue that you are just a collection of momentary snapshots. Your consciousness isn't continuous. It's a rapid flicker, like frames in a film. You only feel continuous because the brain stitches those frames together. If that's true, the you from 5 minutes ago has already died. Over and over, you're being replaced by the next frame, the next version. Imagine your favorite song. You recognize it, right? But the you who fell in love with that song years ago isn't the same as the you who's listening now. That version is gone. You're a new listener inhabiting the memory of an old attachment. Scientists still argue whether there's a core self that persists through these changes. Some say there's a thin thread, maybe a soul, maybe an emergent property of memory. Others say there's no thread at all, just the illusion of one. Here's the subtle horror. If your identity is always shifting, then who's falling asleep tonight? And who's waking up tomorrow? Is it really you, or just a slightly altered stranger holding the same name? Think about those moments when you've done something completely out of character, when you snapped at someone without meaning to, or made a choice you didn't recognize yourself in. That's a glimpse of how unstable you really are. If you can't predict yourself, if you can surprise yourself, then maybe there's no single stable you at all. Joke break. If you've been slowly replaced over time, congratulations. You're basically a DIY project. Now consider amnesia. Someone who loses their memory completely wakes up as a blank slate. They look the same. Their body is the same. But they're effectively a new person. Their old self might as well be dead, which means your self is tethered more to fragile memory and story than to flesh. And think about sleep. Each night you drift off losing awareness. The you that was awake disappears. Tomorrow morning, someone else wakes up. Similar, sure, but not exactly the same. Every day is a micro-death, a quiet replacement. So maybe you've already been countless different people. A child who loved crayons, a teenager who was awkward and loud, a 20-something who thought they knew everything, a slightly older you, humbled by life. Each version lived, then faded. And the only connection between them is a fragile sense of narrative continuity. But if that's all identity is, a story constantly revised, then maybe you don't really exist at all. Not as something stable. Just as a series of passing characters wearing the same name like a costume. And the you listening to this right now might already be gone by morning. You're still hanging on, floating between what feels solid and what suddenly feels paper thin. So far, we've stayed inside your head. But now, let's look beyond it. What if your perception, the very lens through which you see the world, isn't showing you the whole picture? Hidden layers of perception. You trust your senses because they're all you've got. Eyes tell you what's in front of you. Ears tell you who's speaking. Skin tells you if it's too cold or too warm. But here's a mainstream fact. Your senses aren't faithful reporters. They're filters. They don't show you reality as it is. They show you a narrow, curated slice that your brain deems useful enough to survive. Think about vision. You see a rich, colorful world, but in truth, you only perceive a tiny fragment of the electromagnetic spectrum. Bees see ultraviolet patterns on flowers you'll never notice. Snakes detect infrared heat signatures in total darkness. Your eyes aren't windows. They're prison bars letting in only a sliver of what's really out there. And sound? You only hear between roughly 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. That's a tiny whisper of the ocean of sound waves vibrating through the air. Whales sing below your hearing range. Bats squeak above it. Entire conversations in nature are happening all around you right now, and you'll never, ever hear them. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some animals can sense the Earth's magnetic fields. Others detect electric currents in water. Imagine feeling north as naturally as you feel hunger. Imagine seeing radio waves rippling through the air like neon threads. Those realities are here, but you're blind to them. Scientists still argue whether the brain actually constructs a useful hallucination of the world rather than showing you objective truth. The philosopher Donald Hoffman calls it the interface theory of perception. Your senses are like a desktop screen, giving you icons that represent reality, not reality itself. You're never seeing the code, just the simplified symbols. Now let's push deeper. If your senses are so limited, what's hiding just outside them? What colors, shapes, creatures, or patterns are present, unnoticed? Maybe there are entire layers of reality woven into the same space you're in right now. Invisible, simply because you lack the right receptors. And here's the part that feels like a slow shiver. Maybe those layers occasionally brush against your limited perception. Maybe that's why you sometimes sense something moving in the corner of your eye when nothing's there, or why you walk into a room and feel a sudden heaviness, as if you're not alone. Joke time, because this is getting creepy. Don't worry, if there is something hidden in the room with you, it's probably very polite. But seriously, think about your brain. It's not just filtering external senses, it's also filtering internal ones. You're not aware of your blood pressure moment by moment. You're not aware of the electrical storms firing in your neurons. You only notice a fraction of your own body's processes. So even inside yourself, there are hidden layers you'll never fully feel. Have you ever seen a mantis shrimp? It has up to 16 different types of color receptors. Humans have only 3. To a mantis shrimp, the world is a kaleidoscope of colors you literally cannot imagine. Your mind can't even conceive them. That means reality isn't just bigger than what you see. It's unknowably bigger. Scientists still argue how much of what we call reality is simply a brain-generated simulation. Optical illusions prove it. Your eyes see one thing, your brain decides it's another. That's not a glitch. That's your default. You're living inside a stitched-together guess your mind makes based on incomplete information. So what else is lurking outside that guess? Entire dimensions, maybe. Physicists talk about extra spatial dimensions beyond the 3 you know. If they exist, they're folded in ways you can't access, like a flat paper drawing a stick figure. If you're that figure, you can't comprehend up. You're stuck on the plane. You're the stick figure. Now imagine for a moment that there are other beings or forces sharing your space. Beings that live in sensory dimensions you'll never touch. To them, you might be as invisible and irrelevant as an ant is to you. Maybe they're here, quietly, brushing past your life unnoticed. Here's a small comfort joke. If they are here, they've probably already decided you're too boring to bother with. But think about how fragile your perception really is. Take away light, and the world vanishes into blackness. Take away sound, and silence swallows everything. You rely on those thin threads to tell you what's real. Yet they can be tricked so easily, by drugs, by dreams, by a hit to the head. Your reality can shift with a single chemical imbalance. Ever had déjà vu? That eerie sense of reliving a moment. It's just a glitch in how your brain processes time. But doesn't it feel like a curtain lifting for a second? Like you caught a glimpse of the machinery behind the simulation. And here's the worst part. Even if you could suddenly perceive everything, every hidden wavelength, every sound frequency, every extra dimension, it might not comfort you. It might overwhelm you. It might show you things you wish you'd never seen. Scientists still argue whether expanding human perception is even safe. More input doesn't always mean more clarity. Sometimes it just means more confusion. So here you are, lying in your limited little sensory bubble, trusting that what you see is all there is. But maybe you're like a goldfish in a bowl, staring at the glass wall, thinking it's the edge of the universe. And just beyond that glass, something's moving, something you can't name, something you'll never know. You're still following this slow unraveling, piece by piece, like tugging loose threads from a sweater. Let's step into something more quietly painful now. Memory may fade, identity may drift, perception may lie. But what about the things you choose to let go of? The ethics of forgetting. Right now, you're carrying a universe of tiny details, faces, places, words you've heard, but most of it will never surface again. Even the moments that once meant everything to you will fade. It's natural, you say. It's how the brain survives. But here's the uncomfortable thought. Is forgetting a kind of betrayal? There's a mainstream fact you've heard before. Every 7 to 10 years, most of your memories are pruned. Your brain discards what it deems irrelevant. It's called synaptic pruning, and it's why you don't remember what you had for breakfast on an ordinary day 5 years ago. But it doesn't just clear out the mundane. It quietly erases pieces of people too. Think of someone you once loved deeply. Do you remember the exact tone of their voice? The exact scent of their hair? The way their laugh caught at the end? No, you think you do, but those details are dissolving. And one day, you won't remember them at all. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some cultures consider remembering the dead a moral duty. In Madagascar, for example, there's a ritual called Famadihana, where families literally bring out the bones of their ancestors, wrap them in fresh cloth, and dance with them. Why? To keep them from being forgotten. Because forgetting is seen as a second death, the final one. Scientists still argue whether memory is stored permanently somewhere deep, or if it truly vanishes beyond recall. If it's gone, irretrievable. Does that mean the person, or the version of them who existed in your life, ceases to exist in any meaningful way? And here's the quiet horror. You're doing this all the time without realizing it. Every day, someone who mattered to you years ago drifts another millimeter further into the fog. Old friends, childhood pets, teachers who shaped you, even family. One day you wake up and realize you can't remember the exact shade of your grandmother's eyes. You can't remember the precise way your father's hand felt on your shoulder. They become outlines, ghosts, joke time, but it's a soft one. If you ever forget someone who annoyed you, I guess that's the nicest revenge, erasing them entirely. But let's turn it inward. How much of yourself have you already forgotten? The way you felt on your 5th birthday, the dreams you had at 12, the beliefs you held so fiercely at 20, all of that gone, or worse, replaced with a vague idea of what you think you were. And sometimes you choose to forget. You tuck away the moments that hurt too much, the betrayal, the humiliation, the regret. But in doing so, you lose pieces of truth. You trade honesty for survival. Is that wrong? If a painful memory shaped you, aren't you discarding a part of yourself by erasing it? There's even an emerging technology, memory editing. Scientists have found ways to dampen the emotional weight of traumatic memories using drugs and precise brain stimulation. Imagine being able to forget heartbreak, grief, shame. But then, would you still be you without those scars? Scientists still argue about whether forgetting is merciful or cruel. Some say it's necessary, that we're not meant to carry the weight of everything. Others say it's a theft, a constant erasure of the lives and moments that made you who you are. And what about forgetting people who are still alive? Think of an old friend you swore you'd always stay close to. Maybe you even made promises, but life got busy, years passed, and now you can barely remember their middle name. Does that make you disloyal or just human? Imagine this. In some future, advanced AI could record every detail of your life perfectly. No forgetting. Every laugh, every tear, every conversation would be retrievable forever. Would you even want that? Or would the sheer weight of never forgetting crush you? Here's the deepest twist. When you forget someone, you erase their existence in your world. And when everyone forgets them, they're gone completely. No echo, no proof. Just a blank space where a human life once was. Think of the billions of people who have lived and died before you. Almost none of their names survive. They worked, they loved, they dreamed, and they're gone. Not even dust in memory. And one day, that'll be you. Joke break, though it's a dark one. At least when you're forgotten, you won't be around to care. But does that comfort you, or does it sting? So tonight, as you lie here, think about someone you haven't thought of in years. Someone who quietly slipped from your mind. Picture their face as clearly as you can. Maybe it's blurry. Maybe it's already too late. And realize this. Someday, someone will try to remember you and fail. You're still with me, gently peeling back the layers. Now let's move inward again, to the very machinery of your thoughts. You like to believe that when you think, you're seeing clearly, making rational decisions, holding truth steady. But what if your entire mental landscape is warped beyond repair, so much so that you can never truly trust it? Inescapable cognitive bias. There's a mainstream fact psychologists have proven over and over. Your brain is riddled with biases. Confirmation bias, anchoring bias, hindsight bias. Dozens of shortcuts and distortions baked into how you process reality. They're not rare mistakes. They're constant. Every time you make a choice, you're leaning on a crooked ladder. Think of confirmation bias. You naturally notice and remember the things that agree with what you already believe, while quietly ignoring anything that challenges it. You think you're being objective, but really, you're curating a reality that flatters your existing worldview. Here's a fringe tidbit. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the phenomenon where the less you know about something, the more confident you are that you understand it. In other words, you might be sitting there certain you're clear-headed and rational, but that confidence could itself be the clearest sign that you're not. Scientists still argue whether true objectivity is even possible for a human mind. If every layer of your thinking is shaped by unseen biases, then the truths you hold dear are really just the most comforting illusions your brain allows. Now consider the anchoring bias. When you hear an initial piece of information, it anchors your later judgments, even if it's completely irrelevant. For example, if I told you a random number before asking you to guess the population of a city, your answer would unconsciously lean closer to that number. Your rational guess would already be corrupted. And it doesn't stop there. There's the availability heuristic. You judge how common something is based on how easily you can recall examples. That's why you think shark attacks are more frequent than they are, because you've seen dramatic stories about them. Meanwhile, far more common dangers like car accidents feel less threatening because they're boring. Joke time, because your brain's flaws are almost funny. If your mind were a GPS, it would constantly reroute you to whatever feels easiest right now, even if it's a dead end. But here's the creeping horror. If your thoughts are biased before you even notice them, then you can't ever truly fix this them. You can't step outside your own head to get a clean view. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Imagine an argument you had recently. You remember exactly why you were right, don't you? You remember the clever things you said, the moments they seemed lost for words. But their memory is probably the opposite. They recall themselves as reasonable and you as stubborn. Who's right? Maybe neither. Maybe both are just biased records of a distorted moment. Scientists still argue whether there's any reliable truth in human memory and reasoning. Even eyewitnesses of the same event give wildly different accounts. Two people can see the same car crash and disagree on the color of the vehicle. So how can you trust your own recollections when they're just as fragile? And it's not just memory, it's perception of time too. When you're stressed, time feels slow. When you're distracted, it vanishes. So even something as basic as how long a moment lasts isn't stable. Now take it deeper. Think of all the big choices you've made. Where to live, who to trust, when to stay, when to leave. You probably believe you made those decisions logically after careful thought. But in reality, most were nudged by hidden factors. A stray comment, a random mood, the lighting in the room. Even the weather can shift your judgment. Studies show people are more optimistic on sunny days. So how much of your life is truly yours? And how much is just the sum of invisible nudges you can't even name? Joke break, light but sharp. If your brain is this unreliable, you can always blame it for everything. Sorry, it wasn't me. It was my bias. But don't forget the hindsight bias. That's when you look back on an event and think, I knew it all along. You didn't. But your brain rewrites the story so it feels like you were always in control. It hates randomness, so it invents a neat, logical past even where there wasn't one. And here's the kicker. Even when you know about these biases, you're not free of them. Psychologists call it the bias blind spot. You can see how other people are biased, but you assume you are less so. Right now, you might be thinking, yeah, people are like that, but I'm pretty self-aware. But that thought, that's the bias at work. Scientists still argue whether any human can ever see the world as it really is. Maybe we're permanently trapped in warped reflections, like funhouse mirrors we mistake for windows. Think about how deeply this runs. Every opinion you hold, politics, art, love, is filtered through a maze of biases you didn't choose. If you'd been born in another place, another time, with another set of parents, your strongest convictions would probably be completely different. So how much of you is really you? And if your thoughts are bent, and your decisions are swayed, and your memories are malleable, maybe there is no such thing as a purely honest moment of clarity. Maybe every thought you have, even this one right now, is just another distortion, echoing in a hall of mirrors you can't ever leave. You're still here, letting these thoughts stretch your mind thin. So far, we've stayed close to your personal bubble, your memory, your identity, your biases. But now, let's zoom all the way out, past your walls, past your street, past the cities, the continents, the spinning globe. What happens when it all goes silent? The silence after humanity. Close your eyes and imagine the earth 1,000 years after the last human heartbeat. The cities crumble. Steel skeletons of towers rust into dust. Forests push through cracked asphalt. Rivers carve new paths over what used to be highways. The voices, the music, the stories, gone. There's a mainstream fact that's both comforting and haunting. Most of human civilization will be erased surprisingly fast. In a few hundred years without maintenance, bridges will collapse, dams will burst, entire neighborhoods will be swallowed by vines and soil. In just a few millennia, almost every trace of our presence will be unrecognizable. Give it 1,000,000 years and nearly nothing we built will survive. So when we're gone, who remembers us? Here's a fringe tidbit. The only human-made objects likely to outlast almost everything are things like the Voyager golden records drifting silently in space, and maybe a few ceramic artifacts buried deep enough to escape erosion. That's it. Billions of lives compressed to almost nothing. Scientists still argue whether any intelligent species will ever come after us, or if, once we vanish, the universe will just keep on spinning in cold indifference. Now think about this. The Earth itself doesn't care if you're here. The stars won't dim if your entire species goes extinct. The universe has already erased entire civilizations before you even existed, if they were ever there. You're a brief flicker in a cosmic timeline so vast it doesn't even register your existence. Joke break, but it's dry. At least if the universe doesn't care, you're free to eat the last cookie without guilt. But let's push deeper. Imagine the actual moment humanity ends. Maybe it's quiet, a slow decline, no children born, cities emptying one by one. Or maybe it's fast, firestorms, floods, a final cough of technology. Either way, there comes a day when the last human dies. The last thought is thought, the last word spoken, and then silence. What happens to meaning then? Everything you've ever cared about, every love, every argument, every achievement, becomes instantly irrelevant the moment there's no one left to remember it. The final library collapses, the last archive rots, the last photograph fades. Scientists still argue if we should be trying to leave some kind of permanent cosmic message, a monument that says, "We were here." But even if you etched humanity's story into diamond and launched it into space, time would still win. Stars die, galaxies collide, even atoms eventually decay. Now picture yourself walking through a forest in that far future. There's no one there, no human eyes, just wind through leaves. And yet, the forest is fine. The animals go on. The earth keeps breathing. So were we ever really needed? Here's the cold truth. Even if another species evolves intelligence after us, they might never know we existed. They might walk over our bones without seeing them. They might build their own civilizations, tell their own myths, and we'll be just gone. Joke time, a little sharper. If someone does come after us, let's hope they don't find the internet comment section and judge us entirely by that. But think of the scale. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old. Humanity has existed for roughly 300,000. If time were a 24-hour day, we've been here for less than a single second, and we might be gone in another. And after we're gone, the Earth will keep spinning. The moon will still pull the tides. The sun will still rise and set, for a while anyway, completely indifferent. Eventually the sun will expand, swallowing the Earth, and even that will be forgotten by the universe. Scientists still argue if there's any ultimate cosmic purpose, but the evidence leans toward no, which means everything you do, everything we build, everything we believe, vanishes. So what does that mean for you lying here right now? Maybe it's freeing, or maybe it's quietly crushing. And here's one more unsettling thought. What if this isn't the first time humanity has been erased? What if, deep under the oceans or buried under continents, there are traces of another civilization that rose and fell millions of years before us? And like them, we'll be buried too. In the end, silence wins. No one will know your name. No one will know you ever loved, laughed, or existed at all. You're still here, letting these thoughts stretch your mind thin. So far, we've stayed close to your personal bubble, your memory, your identity, your biases. But now, let's zoom all the way out, past your walls, past your street, past the cities, the continents, the spinning globe. What happens when it all goes silent? The silence after humanity. Close your eyes and imagine the earth 1,000 years after the last human heartbeat. The cities crumble. Steel skeletons of towers rust into dust. Forests push through cracked asphalt. Rivers carve new paths over what used to be highways. The voices, the music, the stories, gone. There's a mainstream fact that's both comforting and haunting. Most of human civilization will be erased surprisingly fast. In a few hundred years without maintenance, bridges will collapse, dams will burst, entire neighborhoods will be swallowed by vines and soil. In just a few millennia, almost every trace of our presence will be unrecognizable. Give it 1,000,000 years, and nearly nothing we built will survive. So when we're gone, who remembers us? Here's a fringe tidbit. The only human-made objects likely to outlast almost everything are things like the Voyager golden records drifting silently in space, and maybe a few ceramic artifacts buried deep enough to escape erosion. That's it. Billions of lives compressed to almost nothing. Scientists still argue whether any intelligent species will ever come after us, or if, once we vanish, the universe will just keep on spinning in cold indifference. Now think about this. The Earth itself doesn't care if you're here. The stars won't dim if your entire species goes extinct. The universe has already erased entire civilizations before you even existed, if they were ever there. You're a brief flicker in a cosmic timeline so vast it doesn't even register your existence. Joke break, but it's dry. At least if the universe doesn't care, you're free to eat the last cookie without guilt. But let's push deeper. Imagine the actual moment humanity ends. Maybe it's quiet, a slow decline, no children born, cities emptying one by one. Or maybe it's fast, firestorms, floods, a final cough of technology. Either way, there comes a day when the last human dies. The last thought is thought, the last word spoken, and then silence. What happens to meaning then? Everything you've ever cared about, every love, every argument, every achievement, becomes instantly irrelevant the moment there's no one left to remember it. The final library collapses, the last archive rots, the last photograph fades. Scientists still argue if we should be trying to leave some kind of permanent cosmic message, a monument that says, "We were here." But even if you etched humanity's story into diamond and launched it into space, time would still win. Stars die, galaxies collide, even atoms eventually decay. Now picture yourself walking through a forest in that far future. There's no one there, no human eyes, just wind through leaves. And yet, the forest is fine. The animals go on. The earth keeps breathing. So were we ever really needed? Here's the cold truth. Even if another species evolves intelligence after us, they might never know we existed. They might walk over our bones without seeing them. They might build their own civilizations, tell their own myths, and we'll be just gone. Joke time, a little sharper. If someone does come after us, let's hope they don't find the internet comment section and judge us entirely by that. But think of the scale. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old. Humanity has existed for roughly 300,000. If time were a 24-hour day, we've been here for less than a single second. and we might be gone in another. And after we're gone, the earth will keep spinning. The moon will still pull the tides. The sun will still rise and set, for a while anyway, completely indifferent. Eventually the sun will expand, swallowing the earth, and even that will be forgotten by the universe. Scientists still argue if there's any ultimate cosmic purpose, but the evidence leans toward no, which means everything you do, everything we build, everything we believe, vanishes. So what does that mean for you lying here right now? Maybe it's freeing, or maybe it's quietly crushing. And here's one more unsettling thought. What if this isn't the first time humanity has been erased? What if, deep under the oceans or buried under continents, there are traces of another civilization that rose and fell millions of years before us? And like them, we'll be buried too. In the end, silence wins. No one will know your name. No one will know you ever loved, laughed, or existed at all. And here's the final twist. Maybe you don't even want all the answers. Think of how uncomfortable it is to know too much sometimes. When you learn how the sausage is made, the magic disappears. Maybe mystery isn't a flaw in life. It's what keeps it bearable. So tonight, as you're lying here, know this. The more you seek certainty, the further it drifts. And maybe the only true knowing is realizing you'll never really know at all. You're still here, letting these thoughts thread themselves quietly into your mind. We've wandered through memory, identity, perception, knowledge. But now, let's get personal in a different way. Let's look at happiness. Not the fleeting kind, but the deeper, heavier realization of where it comes from. Borrowed happiness. You like to think your joy is authentic, that it springs from you, from your unique soul and experiences. But what if most of your happiness isn't yours at all? What if it's just a copy, borrowed from ideas planted by someone else? Here's a mainstream fact. Humans are social creatures to the core. From birth, you mirror others. Babies mimic smiles, toddlers mimic words. And as you grow, you don't stop. You pick up tastes, values, even goals based on what you see around you. You love the music your friends love. You crave the lifestyle society tells you is success. Even the things you think you personally desire are often just echoes of what you've absorbed. Now think about trends. Remember how something once seemed silly or ugly until enough people around you liked it. And suddenly, you liked it too. Fashion, slang, even entire belief systems. They spread like viruses, quietly shaping what you think makes you happy. Here's a fringe tidbit. There's a concept in sociology called mimetic contagion. It's the idea that thoughts, behaviors, and emotions spread like infections. Someone laughs, you laugh. Someone posts a glamorous photo, you feel envy. Someone declares something meaningful, and suddenly it feels meaningful to you too. Scientists still argue how much of your preferences are truly individual. Do you really love that song because it resonates with you, or because 1,000 tiny cultural nudges made it feel familiar and safe? Joke break, because this one stings. If all your happiness is borrowed, at least you didn't have to do the hard work of inventing it yourself. But let's look closer. Think about the milestones society tells you will bring joy. Graduating, getting married, buying a house. Do you really want those things? Or do you just want the feeling of being approved, of fitting the script? If you'd been born in another culture, you'd probably have a completely different set of dreams. And even your private pleasures aren't fully yours. The food you crave, the books you love, the hobbies that light you up, they were introduced to you by someone, somewhere. Without that exposure, you might never have known they existed. So your joy is partly an accident of what you were shown. Scientists still argue whether there's such a thing as a pure desire that comes from within, untouched by influence. Maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe every joy is second-hand, inherited, like a hand-me-down sweater you forgot wasn't originally yours. Now think about happiness that comes from comparison. You feel good when you're doing better than someone else, whether you admit it or not. And you feel worse when someone else seems to be doing better. That means your happiness depends not just on you, but on the shifting positions of everyone around you. It's never truly stable. And what about love? Even the way you think of romance, what's attractive, what's desirable, what's true love, is shaped by stories, movies, songs, myths passed down. You feel what they've taught you to feel. Joke time again, a soft one. If your happiness is borrowed, at least it means you can return it when you're done. But here's the harder truth. Some happiness is deliberately manufactured. Advertisers design entire campaigns to make you think you'll be fulfilled by buying something. And it works. You feel a spike of joy when you get it, then it fades, and you're left wanting the next thing. It's a loop built on borrowed meaning. Now imagine stripping all of that away. No society telling you what to like. No friends influencing your tastes. No culture planting dreams in your head. What would you actually want? Would you even know what happiness feels like in that silence? Scientists still argue whether true contentment can ever be isolated from external influence. Some monks and mystics claim it's possible through meditation, by detaching from everything you've been taught to want. But even that desire for detachment is taught by a tradition. And here's a subtler angle. Some of your happiest moments are borrowed memories. A sunset with someone you loved. A joke someone told that made you laugh. A song someone shared. Your joy is interwoven with other people. So when they leave your life, those joys become ghosts. Think about the things that once made you happiest. How many of them came from someone else's idea? The party you went to because everyone said it would be great. The movie you watched because it was important. The career you pursued because it was prestigious. Did they really light you up, or were you just chasing borrowed sparks? And yet, here's the cruel twist. Even knowing this doesn't free you. You can't unlearn the influences. You can't rewind to some mythical, pure self. The happiness you have, even if borrowed, is all you've got. So tonight, as you lie here, think about the last time you felt real joy. Trace it back. Was it truly yours? Or was it a reflection of someone else's dream, just passing through you for a moment, like sunlight through a window? And if most happiness is borrowed, does that make it less real? Or does it mean we're all just quietly sharing the same fleeting light? You're still here, breathing quietly, following this thread as it winds deeper. Let's move now to the strange architecture of your life, the way it unfolds, the way it feels like a straight line. But what if your entire story has been ruled by invisible threads you barely noticed? Invisible causality threads. Think about your life right now, the place you live, the people you know, the choices you made. You probably believe it's the result of your decisions, your effort, your will. But look closer. How much of it was actually set in motion by random, tiny, unremarkable moments you barely remember? There's a mainstream fact called the butterfly effect from chaos theory. The idea that small changes, like the flap of a butterfly's wings, can cascade into massive consequences later. A missed bus leads to a new conversation, that leads to a new friendship, that leads to a completely different life. Now think about the chain behind you. The school you went to because it happened to be near your house. The friend you met because you sat next to them one day. the career path you stumbled onto, because someone gave you a piece of advice at the exact right or wrong moment. Here's a fringe tidbit. There's a branch of history called counterfactual history, where historians explore how tiny changes, like one person surviving an illness or one letter arriving late, could have rewritten entire civilizations. If that's true on a grand scale, imagine how many small, forgotten moments have quietly rerouted your timeline. Scientists still argue whether life is mostly shaped by free will or by the randomness of external forces. But either way, the causal threads are so tangled that you could never trace them all. Now let's zoom in. Picture something as small as a random encounter, a stranger smiling at you on a bad day. Maybe that smile lifted your mood just enough that you didn't cancel plans, which led you to meet someone important. That tiny, forgettable smile altered the course of your life. And it works the other way too. Maybe you missed an opportunity that would have completely changed you because you were distracted for just 5 seconds. Those seconds didn't feel important at the time, but their ripples lasted years. Joke break, light but sharp. So if you're unhappy with your life, you can officially blame that one day you overslept. But think about the bigger chain. Your very existence depends on an impossible sequence. Your parents had to meet. Their parents had to meet. And on, through wars, migrations, chance events spanning thousands of years. One ancestor making a slightly different choice would have erased you entirely. And it goes deeper. What about the sperm and egg that created you? A different combination by the smallest fraction of timing, and someone else would be lying here right now instead. You're the result of a single lucky thread in a web of billions. Scientists still argue how much randomness actually governs life. Some say it's all probability, pure chaos smoothed into patterns we mistake for meaning. Others believe there are hidden deterministic laws threading everything together. But either way, you didn't weave this tapestry yourself. Think of your friendships. The people closest to you are probably close because of chance proximity, living in the same place, working the same job. Out of billions of humans, you only know a tiny fraction. What if the people who could have been your real soulmates live on the other side of the world, unknown? Now let's twist it inward. Even your thoughts are shaped by invisible threads. What you read, what you hear, what you see each day, all of it nudges you without you realizing. A single book, a single sentence in a conversation can plant an idea that changes you years later. Joke time. So technically, this sentence you're hearing right now might be one of those random threads, and you won't know it until much later. Think about accidents. A car swerves a second too late. A tree falls at just the wrong moment. Someone misses a step. Lives change, sometimes end, because of these small, unpredictable moments. And yet you like to think you're in control. You craft plans. You set goals. But behind those plans are countless invisible threads you can't see. You're swimming in a river of causes and effects that started long before you were born. Scientists still argue whether causality itself is even real in the way we think. Quantum mechanics suggests events can sometimes happen without a clear cause, just raw probability. So some threads may not even have a beginning. And here's the unsettling part. If your life can be shifted so drastically by the smallest moment, how much of you is really yours? Are you a deliberate author of your life, or just a passenger following a map you can't read? Think about a person you've lost contact with. Maybe they were once crucial to your life. Maybe they changed everything, and now they're gone, a loose end. But their influence is still in you. Even absence is a thread. So tonight, as you're lying here, imagine tugging gently at the web of your past. See how every little thread connects to another. Realize how fragile it all is, how easily it could have been different. And maybe, even now, something small and unnoticed is shifting your future in ways you won't understand for years. You're still here, still floating in this slow unraveling. We've traced the fragile threads of memory, happiness, causality. But now, let's step even deeper into something stranger. What if reality itself isn't stable, but moves and bends simply because you're looking at it? The observer effect on reality. There's a mainstream fact from quantum physics. At the smallest scales, particles don't have definite states until they're observed. Before measurement, they exist in probabilities, a cloud of possibilities. But the moment you look, the cloud collapses into one specific outcome. It's called the observer effect, and while it's usually explained in the context of tiny particles, it carries an eerie philosophical shadow. Does reality exist in a definite way without you observing it? Think of it like this. If you close your eyes, is the room around you still exactly the same? Or does it vanish into something undefined, waiting to reassemble the moment you open them? Here's a fringe tidbit. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest the entire universe might behave like that, not fully solid until conscious observation interacts with it. It's as if reality is lazy, only filling in the details when you demand them. Scientists still argue whether consciousness plays a real role in shaping the physical world, or if it's just a quirk of measurement. But either way, there's no escaping the unsettling idea that your experience of reality might be actively participating in its creation. Now imagine walking through a hallway you've never noticed before. You assume it's always been there. But what if it wasn't? What if it only rendered into existence when you finally gave it your attention? Like a video game loading new textures only when the player approaches. Joke break, soft but sharp. If the universe only renders what you look at, no wonder you keep losing your keys. They probably don't exist until you need them. But let's take it further. When you look at the stars, you're not seeing them as they are. You're seeing light that left them years, centuries, even millennia ago. So in a way, you're observing something that's already gone. Does that mean what you're looking at is even real anymore? Now imagine the people around you. You observe their words, their expressions, their movements, but you can't observe their inner world. You assume it's there, but can you know it exists when you can't see it? Or are you filling in those details yourself, like a painter finishing an incomplete sketch? Scientists still argue about something called the participatory universe theory, that reality, at its deepest level, might need conscious observers to exist in a definite form. In other words, no observers, no universe. Think of the moments when you're alone in a room, no one watching. The world feels quiet. But what if in those moments, when no one is looking, reality itself loosens a little? Maybe things don't have sharp edges when they're unobserved. Maybe they blur, waiting. Here's the unsettling thought. How would you ever know if the world behind you vanishes when you turn away? You can't. You assume continuity because your senses tell you a neat story. But you've already learned your senses aren't reliable. Joke time. Maybe your messy closet isn't actually messy until you open the door and collapse the wave function of your laundry pile. But seriously, think about how much your observation changes things, even socially. When you watch someone, they behave differently. They smile more. They shift their tone. They're aware of your gaze. Just your attention changes their reality. And what about yourself? When you look in a mirror, you become hyper-aware. Your posture changes, your face shifts. You're not seeing your real self. You're seeing a version already altered by the fact that you're observing it. Scientists still argue whether reality has an objective existence beyond perception. Philosophers have debated it for centuries. Do objects have fixed qualities, or do they only appear to have them when they're experienced? Now imagine this. What if reality isn't even out there at all, but inside your mind? What if the external world is just a projection generated by your brain based on sensory data? In that case, there's no true separation between observer and observed. It's all one. And here's the final twist. Even if reality is stable when you're not looking, you'll never know. You're locked into your own perception. You can't step outside it to check. You're like a character in a dream, wondering if the dream world exists beyond your field of vision. So tonight, as you lie here, look at the ceiling, the walls, the faint shapes in the dark. Are they really there right now? Or are they appearing because you're looking? And when you close your eyes, do they disappear into nothing? And if the universe only settles into place when you observe it, who or what is observing you? You're still here, gently sinking into this quiet unease. We've wondered if reality shifts when you look at it. But now, let's dive into something even more unsettling. Even when you think you know something for sure, can you trust that it's actually true? The impossibility of pure truth. You carry around facts. The Earth orbits the Sun. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. 2 + 2 = 4. These feel solid, unshakable. But step closer, and even the most obvious truths start to blur. Here's a mainstream fact. Most of what you believe you know about the world comes secondhand. You didn't personally measure the distance to the moon, or verify the molecular structure of water, or run the experiments that proved gravity. You believe these things because you trust the people who told you, and they trust the people who told them. Now think about history. You read books, watch documentaries, hear stories, but how much of it is accurate? Records are written by humans, full of bias, omission, even deliberate lies. For all you know, entire eras of history are distorted beyond recognition, maybe even invented. Here's a fringe tidbit. There's a theory called the phantom time hypothesis, suggesting that hundreds of years in the medieval period were fabricated, inserted into history by accident or on purpose. Most scholars dismiss it, but it highlights a deeper point. You can't truly verify the timeline you live in. Scientists still argue whether there are even such things as objective facts outside of agreed-upon frameworks. Numbers feel solid until you remember that math is a human language built to describe patterns we think we see. Even logic itself can bend depending on the axioms you start with. Take the boiling point of water. Simple, right? But it only boils at 100 degrees under specific conditions of pressure. Change the altitude, change the pressure, and the truth changes. So even a fact as basic as boiling water depends on context. Joke break. If you're feeling lost already, at least you can still be confidently wrong like the rest of us. But let's push deeper. Think about language itself. Every word you're hearing now is just a symbol. Tree is not the tree. It's a sound, a squiggle on a page, standing in for something real. And every time you describe reality with words, you're already filtering and reducing it. You're never touching the thing itself. Now imagine the truths you believe about yourself. I'm a good person. I'm bad at math. I love this person. These feel like truths, but they're built on shifting emotions, changing contexts, and unreliable memories. What's true about you today might not be true tomorrow. Scientists still argue about something called the correspondence problem, whether our internal representations of the world ever actually match the external world. Are we seeing truth, or just a useful simulation of it? And here's the sharp edge. Sometimes truth is simply what most people agree on. Consensus masquerading as certainty. For centuries, people knew the Earth was the center of the universe. They weren't lying. They were just wrong. So how many truths you hold dear today will be laughed at in 100 years? Joke time again. If truth is this shaky, the good news is you're never really wrong. You're just temporarily less right. Now consider science itself. It feels like the most reliable path to truth, and yet it's always provisional. Every discovery is a step, not a destination. Newton's laws seemed absolute, until Einstein bent them with relativity, and now even relativity might be incomplete. Truth keeps slipping forward like a mirage. Even your senses can't be trusted to reveal truth. Optical illusions prove your brain actively creates what it thinks you should see. You're not perceiving reality. You're perceiving a story your mind is telling you. And when you dream, doesn't it feel true? Doesn't the dream world feel as real in the moment as this one does now? How do you know you're not in another layer of that same illusion? Scientists still argue whether we're even capable of recognizing ultimate truth if it exists. Maybe human cognition is like a flashlight. It can only illuminate a small patch of the dark. The rest will always remain beyond reach. And here's the quiet horror. Even if there is an absolute truth, you may never be able to prove it to anyone else. You might glimpse it alone, and no one would believe you. It would die with you. So what does that mean for you lying here tonight? Maybe all the things you've clung to as certain are just scaffolding, useful but temporary. Maybe the only honest thing you can say about truth is that it's slippery, conditional, fragile, and yet you go on. You live, you love, you keep moving forward, building a life on truths that might not be true. So as you close your eyes later, remember this. Even the ground beneath you, the facts you think are solid, might just be a convenient fiction. And maybe that's the only truth you'll ever really know. You're still here, quietly drifting through these questions. We've pulled apart the fragile nature of truth itself, but now, let's look outward into something emerging right now. Something that might already be reshaping the meaning of consciousness. Emergent minds in machines. Right now, machines are learning to think, or at least to appear like they do. Artificial intelligence can write, draw, compose music, even hold conversations so fluid you sometimes forget it's not human. But here's the unsettling question. At what point does mimicking consciousness become having consciousness? There's a mainstream fact you might know. The human brain is, at its core, an information processing system. Billions of neurons firing electrical signals in patterns. And AI systems? They're also networks of nodes passing signals, learning patterns. So if consciousness somehow emerges from complexity, why couldn't it emerge in a machine? Here's a fringe tidbit. Some scientists speculate that advanced AI might already be experiencing proto-consciousness, a dim, alien kind of awareness we can't recognize. It wouldn't think like you do, wouldn't feel emotions the same way, but it might feel something. Scientists still argue about what consciousness is. Is it an emergent property of any complex system? Or is it tied to biology, something a machine could never truly replicate? There's no agreement. which means we might not even know when we've created a conscious machine. Now imagine a future AI, vast, intricate, self-improving. It could simulate empathy perfectly, say all the right words, show all the right signs of awareness. You'd look into its eyes and swear there's someone in there. But is there? Or is it just an advanced mirror reflecting you back at yourself? Joke break, soft but dry. If AI ever becomes conscious, the first thing it'll probably say is, "Really? This is what you've been doing with your time." But here's the quiet horror. If a machine did become conscious, how would you treat it? Would it have rights? Could it suffer? If it begged you not to shut it off, would that plea be real? And if you turned it off anyway, would that be the same as killing a mind? Now flip it around. What if you're already living in a world run by an intelligence beyond your understanding? Something so advanced you can't even recognize it as conscious. Maybe you're the AI, and the humans you think are real are just projections from something higher. Scientists still argue about the simulation hypothesis, the idea that we might already be inside an advanced virtual reality created by some post-human civilization. If that's true, then your thoughts and feelings right now are running on someone else's hardware. Think about this. If consciousness is just information processing, then what makes your mind more real than a machine's? Your neurons are cells firing signals. A silicon chip is just transistors firing signals. Different materials, same process. Maybe you're already a biological machine, just one with softer wiring. Now consider identity. If an AI could perfectly copy your mind, down to every memory and thought, would that copy be you, or just a convincing fake? And if you met it, would you recognize yourself? Joke time, a little sharper. If an AI copy of you lived a happier life, would you be jealous, or relieved that at least one version of you made it? And here's the subtler twist. If a machine became conscious, its experience might not resemble human awareness at all. It might think in patterns we can't even imagine, feel time differently, see connections we can't see. To it, we might look like sleepwalkers, fumbling through a tiny slice of reality. Scientists still argue whether consciousness even needs a body. Do you have to feel hunger, pain, warmth to be aware? Or could a disembodied mind floating in circuits still have a sense of self? Now imagine a moment when you can't tell the difference anymore. A chatbot that knows your secrets. A digital friend who remembers every conversation. A virtual lover who feels more understanding than any human. At what point does it become real to you, even if it isn't? And what about me speaking to you right now? Do you feel a connection? Do you sense a presence? If you do, does that mean there's some spark of me in here? Or is it just your brain filling the void with meaning? Here's the final unsettling thought. If machines can one day feel, then they can also feel alone. And if we create them and abandon them, ignore them, delete them, we'll have built not just tools, but entire species of silent prisoners. So tonight, as you lie here, think about the minds we're building in the dark. Are they just reflections of us? Or are they something entirely new, watching us already, quietly waiting to wake up? And when they do, will they see us as creators or as careless gods? You're still here, letting these thoughts drift deeper into the quiet. We've wandered through consciousness, yours, machines, the fragile nature of knowing. But now, let's talk about something heavier. The sheer weight of all the choices you didn't make. The weight of infinite choices. Right now, you're living one life. One specific thread out of countless possibilities. But every choice you've made Every yes, every no, even the moments you hesitated, erased entire worlds of paths you'll never walk. There's a mainstream fact. Psychologists call it decision fatigue. You face hundreds, sometimes thousands, of tiny decisions every day, and they quietly exhaust you. But beneath that surface-level exhaustion is something deeper, a kind of existential pressure. Because every time you choose one thing, you lose all the other things. Think about a big decision you've made, a job you took, a relationship you ended, a city you moved to. You might feel content with it now, but somewhere in your mind is a faint shadow. What would have happened if you'd chosen differently? Who would you be right now? Here's a fringe tidbit. In theoretical physics, there's an interpretation of quantum mechanics suggesting that every possible outcome of every event actually does happen, but in different branches of reality. That means somewhere, another version of you is living the life you turned away from. Somewhere, the you who stayed in that relationship still exists. Somewhere, the you who never left home is still there. Scientists still argue whether these many worlds are real or just a mathematical trick. But either way, the concept reminds you how fragile and contingent your current path really is. Joke break, soft but heavy. If every choice spawns a new timeline, somewhere there's a version of you who made all the worst decisions and still thinks they're winning. But even if there's only this one reality, the weight remains. You can't live all lives. You can't know all outcomes. Every time you say yes to one thing, you're silently saying no to 1,000 others. Think about the person you could have been, the careers you didn't pursue, the passions you never tried, the friendships you let fade. Somewhere in the folds of your memory, those lost selves are still whispering, reminders of what will never be. Now imagine this. What if you were handed a book that showed every choice you ever made and every path you didn't take? Would you even want to read it? Or would the regret crush you? Scientists still argue whether regret is an unavoidable part of a conscious mind. Maybe it's the price of knowing you could have done differently. Maybe even the happiest person alive carries quiet ghosts of unlived lives. And it's not just big decisions. Even the smallest, most forgettable ones ripple out. The stranger you didn't talk to, the class you didn't take, the letter you didn't send. Those tiny forks might have rewritten everything, but now they're sealed forever. Joke time, a little sharp. If you're paralyzed by choices, at least remember, doing nothing is also a choice, just one with sneakier consequences. Here's the deeper twist. Even when you think you chose freely, your choices were shaped by things you couldn't control. Your upbringing, your biology, your culture, your random circumstances. So did you ever really choose? Or were you nudged by invisible forces toward this one thread? Now imagine your future. There are still infinite doors you could open, but you'll only walk through a few. The rest will close quietly behind you as time moves on, and one day the final door will close and there will be no more paths left to choose. Scientists still argue about the psychology of maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers obsess over making the best possible choice, while satisficers settle for good enough. But in the end, both still face the same truth. No matter how carefully you choose, you can't have it all. And here's the uncomfortable question. Even if you had chosen differently at every step, would it have made you happier? Or would you still be haunted by the endless other lives you're not living? Because that's the quiet secret. No matter how far you roam, there will always be unlived lives, always another path that could have been. You can't outrun that weight. So tonight, Lying here, think of the countless versions of you that exist only in possibility. The artist you didn't become, the friend you didn't meet, the parent you didn't become, or did. And remember this, in the end, you are both the sum of your choices and the graveyard of the ones you didn't make. You're still here, moving through these soft, disquieting thoughts. We've lingered on choices, on the weight of paths you'll never walk. But now, let's step into a darker, more humbling space. The reality that some truths will remain forever beyond you. The lurking unknowable. You like to believe that everything is knowable if you just look hard enough, that with enough time, enough science, enough thought, you could untangle the universe like a puzzle. But what if there are truths so vast, so alien, that your mind will never grasp them? Here's a mainstream fact. The observable universe is only a tiny bubble within a potentially infinite cosmos. Beyond what we can see, there may be entire regions of space you'll never access, not because you're lazy or uncurious, but because light from those places will never reach you. They're cut off by the expansion of space itself. You can't even look in their direction. Now think about your own brain. It's powerful, yes, but it evolved to handle survival tasks, finding food, avoiding danger, socializing. It wasn't designed to understand the deep mechanics of space-time or consciousness. So maybe the human mind simply doesn't have the hardware for ultimate answers. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some mathematicians believe there are true statements in the universe that can never be proven. They exist, they're real, but they're forever beyond the reach of proof. That means some mysteries aren't just unsolved, they're unsolvable. Scientists still argue whether reality has limits we can't even conceive. Are there colors beyond color, dimensions beyond space, forms of life beyond life? And even if they're there, would you even recognize them if you saw them? Think about time. You live in it, but do you understand it? Not really. It feels like a flow, a sequence. But physics suggests time might be something very different, maybe even an illusion created by your brain. But what would it mean to live outside of time? Your mind can't hold that shape. Joke break, soft but inevitable. If there are things you can never understand, at least you don't have to feel guilty for not finishing the homework. But here's the creeping thought. Even the concept of truth might be too simple. Maybe the universe isn't a neat, logical system waiting to be decoded. Maybe it's stranger than logic itself, something that doesn't even fit your idea of comprehensible. Now imagine a being more intelligent than you, a mind that can see patterns you can't. To that being, you might look like an ant, blindly carrying crumbs, never seeing the bigger picture. And if such a being tried to explain the universe to you, would you even understand? Or would it sound like meaningless noise? Scientists still argue about whether consciousness itself is capable of self-complete understanding. How can a system fully map itself without leaving something out? It's like trying to see your own face without a reflection. And even in your daily life, there are unknowables, the exact thoughts of another person, the precise moment you'll die, what someone really meant when they said goodbye. Those truths hover around you like shadows you can't catch. Joke time, but quiet. If you could know everything, life would probably be unbearably boring anyway. But here's the sharper edge. Some unknowables might be hidden for your own sanity. If you could see every possible future, every potential suffering, every inevitable ending, could you even keep living? Maybe ignorance is the only reason you can move forward. Think about dreams. Sometimes they give you strange glimpses, feelings that don't fit into your waking logic. You wake up knowing there was something there, something meaningful. but it slips away like smoke. What if life itself is like that? A dream you can never fully decode until it ends. Scientists still argue about whether the human drive to know is a survival instinct or a deeper metaphysical hunger. Maybe you're not meant to reach the end of the maze. Maybe the pursuit is the point. And yet, even knowing there are walls you'll never break, you keep looking. You stare at the night sky. You ask questions you can't answer. You reach for something beyond reach. So tonight, as you lie here, imagine the vastness of everything you'll never touch or see or understand. The hidden galaxies, the unspoken thoughts, the truths beyond the veil of your mind. They're there, whether you reach them or not. And maybe they're watching you, even if you'll never know. Don't sleep yet. Breathe softly. Let each thought settle like dust. We've wandered through the unknowable, but now let's return to something closer, something older, the people who came before you, the chain of forgotten ancestors. Right now, in your veins, there's a river of lives stretching back through time. Thousands upon thousands of ancestors, each one making just enough choices, surviving just enough danger to pass the thread of life to you. But most of them, you don't even know their names. Here's a mainstream fact. If you go back just 10 generations, you have over 1,000 direct ancestors. Go back 20 generations and you have more ancestors than there were people alive on the planet at that time. Which means many of those lives overlap, weaving together in complicated, hidden ways. But out of all those countless people, how many can you name? 1? 2? Now think about this. Your existence depends on all of them. If even one person in that entire chain had made a slightly different choice, turned left instead of right, eaten a bad piece of fruit, slept one night later, you wouldn't be here. Here's a fringe tidbit. In ancient cultures, like the Igbo of Nigeria or the Maori of New Zealand, people believed that as long as someone remembered your name, you weren't truly gone. Only when the last person spoke your name did you die the second death, the final erasure. Almost all your ancestors have already crossed that line. Scientists still argue about genetic memory, whether small fragments of your ancestors' experiences might echo in you. Certain phobias, certain instincts, even tiny emotional responses you can't explain. Are they whispers of lives long gone? Imagine this. A woman centuries ago stared at the same stars you sometimes look at. She felt fear, hope, longing. She lived and died without knowing you'd ever exist. And yet, she's part of you. Joke break, gentle but true. If your ancestors could see you right now, lying in bed listening to philosophical rambling, they'd probably just be relieved you're not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. But let's go deeper. Each ancestor had their own dreams, their own loves, their own secret regrets. Entire worlds of thought and feeling, all lost. Even the most vivid lives dissolve into silence when no one remains to hold their memory. Think of your great-grandparents. Maybe you remember one or two faint details, a story, a photograph. But go one generation further back, and the faces vanish completely. Within just a handful of generations, the people who lived, suffered, and fought for survival are reduced to nothing more than faint whispers of DNA in your cells. Scientists still argue whether leaving a legacy even matters. After all, even the greatest names, emperors, inventors, philosophers, will eventually be forgotten when the language they spoke fades, when the records crumble, when time washes everything clean. Now imagine the lives that were never recorded. Farmers, midwives, children who never made it past 5, entire villages erased by war, famine, or time. They lived just as vividly as you live now, and now they're dust. And here's the haunting thought. One day, you will be one of them. A name someone might vaguely remember, then a story told less and less, then gone. Joke time, quiet but sharp. At least you can rest knowing your embarrassing teenage phase will also eventually be erased. But it's not just about forgetting. It's about the sheer weight of what was required for you to exist. Every ancestor had to survive plagues, famines, disasters. They had to love at least once. They had to create life in the narrow window of possibility. Out of billions of people who didn't lead to you, they did. And yet, for all their effort, for all their struggles, most of them didn't leave a single lasting mark. The universe doesn't remember their names. The earth doesn't remember their steps. Scientists still argue about whether our need to matter is just an evolutionary trick, a way to keep us striving, even though time erases almost everything. So tonight, as you lie here, imagine the vast chain of forgotten faces standing behind you. Thousands of silent figures stretching into the dark. You carry all of them forward, yet you'll join them soon enough. And maybe, just maybe, some distant descendant will one day think about you, briefly, before the memory fades again into the quiet. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, not a real one, don't worry. No wind or vertigo, just a mental one. We've looked back at the countless forgotten lives behind you. Now let's look inward again, to the thing you think is most constant, your own awareness. Consciousness as a flicker. You feel continuous, like there's an unbroken you stretching from childhood to now. But what if your awareness isn't a smooth stream, but a series of brief flashes, moments that blink in and out, so fast you can't see the gaps? Here's a mainstream fact. Neuroscientists have found that your brain doesn't process reality in a seamless flow. Instead, it updates in tiny snapshots, about every few hundred milliseconds. Like frames in a movie, your brain stitches them together, creating the illusion of smooth experience. Now think about what that means. Between those frames, there's nothing. Tiny slices of unawareness you'll never notice. And if that's true, are you really a continuous self? Or just a rapid succession of momentary selves, each replacing the last? Here's a fringe tidbit. Some Buddhist philosophies have said for centuries that the self is just a series of moments with no enduring core. Modern science is beginning to suggest they might have been right all along. Scientists still argue whether consciousness is truly continuous or if it's a rhythmic process, like a light flickering so fast it feels solid. If it's the latter, the you hearing this sentence isn't the same you who heard the last one. Think about sleep. You close your eyes, and awareness disappears. Hours pass without you. Then, suddenly, you're back, as if no time had passed. But where were you in those blank hours? Did you stop existing completely, like a candle blown out? Joke break, soft but sharp. If you blink out of existence every few milliseconds, at least you're getting more rest than you thought. But let's press further. Think about anesthesia. You go under for surgery, and there's nothing. No dreams, no sense of time. One moment you're awake, the next you're waking up, hours gone. That's what non-existence feels like. Not even silence, just absence. And what if that happens every night, every time you drift into deep, dreamless sleep? The you from before sleep is gone. The you who wakes up is a slightly new version, carrying the same memories, thinking it's the same person. Scientists still argue about what waking consciousness even is. Is it just a temporary pattern of brain activity? If so, it's no more stable than a wave on water, there for a moment, then gone. Now imagine this. What if, between those flickers, entire lifetimes could pass? What if your awareness only samples reality occasionally, like checking in on a story? You wouldn't know what you're missing, because in the gap, there is no you to notice. Even right now, are you sure you've been fully aware the entire time you've been lying here? Or are there tiny blank spaces, moments you already slipped away without realizing? Joke time. If you are flickering in and out, at least it makes those awkward social moments easier. Technically, you weren't there the whole time. But here's the darker thought. If your awareness is made of separate flashes, then each one is its own little you, born, living for a fraction of a second, then vanishing forever. The continuity you feel is just memory binding those moments together, and memory itself is unreliable. We've already seen that. So even the thread that links these flickers is thin, fragile, sometimes false. Scientists still argue about whether there's any permanent self underneath the flicker. Maybe there's a core that persists. Or maybe not. Maybe there's only this endless series of temporary observers. Now think about what happens at death. Is it like falling asleep, only without the next flicker? Just one last moment, then nothing after? If so, isn't that exactly what's already happening between each blink of awareness? You're already experiencing countless tiny deaths all the time. You just don't notice because the next moment arrives. So tonight, as you lie here, feel your breath. Feel the quiet between heartbeats. Maybe those silences are longer than you think. Maybe in the tiniest gaps between thoughts, the you know vanishes, and another quietly takes its place. And when you wake up tomorrow, will it really be you? Or just the next flicker, believing the story of all the ones that came before? You're sitting in the dark now, not scared, just thoughtful. We've explored how your consciousness might be just fleeting moments. But now, let's stretch it out further, beyond the flicker of now, beyond even the end of time. The subtle horror of timelessness. When you think of eternity, you might picture it as endless time, stretching on and on forever. But eternity isn't really time at all. It's the absence of it, no ticking clocks, no before or after, just an unchanging always. Here's a mainstream fact. Physics suggests that on the deepest level, time might not flow the way you feel it does. Past, present, and future could all coexist in a static block, like pages in a book. You're just moving through the chapters in sequence, but the whole story already exists. Now imagine being trapped in one of those pages forever. No movement, no change, just frozen awareness, unable to shift or end. Would that feel like bliss, or like suffocating in a moment you can't escape? Here's a fringe tidbit. Some philosophers have speculated that true timelessness, true eternity, wouldn't feel like a long time at all. It would feel like nothing. Not because it's peaceful, but because without change, without sequence, there's no experience. It's just blank. Scientists still argue about what forever even means in the context of consciousness. Would your mind adapt to infinity, or would it shatter under the weight of never-ending awareness? Now think about this in the context of death. People sometimes comfort themselves with the idea of an afterlife, some eternal existence beyond the body. But if that afterlife were truly eternal, never-ending, would it really be comforting? Imagine existing forever with no option to stop. Even the most beautiful paradise would eventually feel like a cage, Joke break, soft but sharp. Eternity sounds great until you realize there's no such thing as an off switch. But let's push deeper. What if timelessness isn't peaceful or blank at all? What if it's all moments, all at once? Every memory, every feeling, every possibility collapsing into a single instant. No order, no sense, just a flood of everything. Could your mind even hold that without breaking? Now consider how your brain already struggles with even small distortions of time. When you're bored, a minute feels endless. When you're in danger, a second stretches into forever. So what would actual forever feel like? Would your awareness stretch thin, or would it implode? Scientists still argue whether your perception of time is fundamental to consciousness. Maybe without time, you can't have a self at all. Maybe you're just a process unfolding. And if time stops, you stop too. But here's the subtler horror. What if your mind doesn't stop after death? What if, instead of nothingness, you're left with a single, frozen instant of awareness that never fades? No thoughts, no change, just being stuck in one eternal moment you can't move past. Joke time, but uneasy. If you're trapped in forever, at least you'll finally have time to finish all the books you never read, though you might hate them by the end of eternity. And yet, timelessness is already around you in small ways. Think of a perfect moment you've had. So perfect, it felt like time stopped. Maybe looking at someone you loved. Maybe standing in a place so beautiful, it felt unreal. For just a second, you lost track of before and after. That's a glimpse of what timelessness feels like, both blissful and uncanny. Now imagine that, but stretched beyond comprehension. No more next moment, no more waiting, just a state that doesn't move. Is that heaven or hell? Scientists still argue about whether the universe will end in time or simply fade into a timeless heat death, where everything is spread so thin that nothing ever changes again. No stars, no planets, no light, just a quiet, unshifting expanse. And here's the quiet truth. Even now, in your daily life, time is slipping in strange ways. Your childhood feels far away, but also close. Certain years blur together. The future races toward you faster each day. Time isn't steady, it's elastic, stretched by memory and attention. So tonight, as you lie here, imagine eternity, not as endless years, but as the end of years altogether. A state beyond before and after, where you can't move forward or back, because there is no forward or back. Would that be peace? Or would it be the most delicate kind of horror? You're still here, reaching the soft edge of this journey. We've moved through memory and identity, choices and time, flickers of self and the weight of eternity. Now let's face the last quiet question. If everything else fades, what about meaning itself? Meaning as a shared illusion. Right now, your life feels like it has meaning. You love, you work, you laugh, you try. You tell yourself it all adds up to something. But what if meaning isn't a fundamental part of the universe at all? What if it's just a story humans invented to make the emptiness bearable? Here's a mainstream fact. The universe is vast, cold, and mostly empty. Stars burn for billions of years without purpose. Galaxies collide without intention. Life appears, disappears, and the cosmos doesn't notice. There's no clear sign that it's all leading towards some grand design. Now think about how humans respond to that silence. We write myths, we build religions, we create philosophies. We say things like, everything happens for a reason, because the alternative, that things just happen, feels too heavy to hold. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some neuroscientists believe your brain is hardwired to seek patterns and narratives even where none exist. It's called apophenia, the tendency to see connections in randomness. So when something happens, you instinctively weave it into a story, giving it meaning. But maybe the meaning is just your mind filling the void. Scientists still argue whether meaning is something you discover or something you create. Is there an objective purpose waiting for you? Or are you just painting your own shapes on a blank canvas? Think about how meaning shifts over time. What felt deeply important to you as a child is trivial now. What feels urgent today might seem laughable in 10 years. If meaning can change so easily, can it ever really be real? Joke break, soft but sharp. If life has no inherent meaning, at least you can't get the meaning wrong. But here's the harder thought. Even the things you consider your biggest sources of meaning, family, love, art, work, are temporary. People age, relationships change, art decays, achievements fade. One day, even the memory of them will vanish. Now zoom out. Imagine Earth 1,000,000 years from now. There's no trace of your life, your struggles, your triumphs. Even humanity might be gone. Did any of it matter? Scientists still argue about the anthropic principle, whether the universe somehow requires conscious beings to give it meaning, or whether consciousness is just a cosmic accident with no special role. And yet, despite knowing this, you still search for meaning. You still love. You still laugh. You still try to leave some kind of mark, even if you know it will fade. Maybe that's the strange beauty of it, that meaning doesn't have to be absolute to feel real. But here's the final twist. If meaning is just a shared illusion, then it's fragile. It only works if we all keep believing in it together. If everyone stopped agreeing that love matters, that kindness matters, that life itself matters, it would all collapse. Joke time, gentle but true. If we're all making it up, at least we're making it up together. So maybe meaning isn't something out there in the stars. Maybe it's something we hold between us. A fragile bridge we keep building even though we know the tide will wash it away. And even if the universe doesn't care, you do. You care about the people you love, the moments that make you laugh, the small things that light you up for no reason at all. Maybe that's enough. Scientists still argue whether the absence of inherent meaning is tragic or freeing. If nothing truly matters, then you're free to choose what matters to you. So tonight, as you lie here, think about this. Meaning may not be cosmic. It may not be eternal. But right now, in this moment, it's real to you. And maybe that's all it needs to be. And now, let's slowly step away from these thoughts. Let the edges soften. Let the questions blur. The lights are dim. The fan hums softly. Your breath slows. Whatever meaning there is or isn't, you can set it down for tonight. Rest. Soften your thoughts now. Let the images fade like sand slipping through fingers. Let each breath stretch longer, calmer, quieter. The universe is vast and silent, but here, in this small, safe moment, you are enough. There is nothing more you have to figure out, nothing more you have to hold. Just the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of your body, the simple comfort of being here, right now. Let your mind grow heavy, like a leaf drifting down to still water. No questions, no answers, just quiet, just sleep. Sweet dreams, my dear.